Financial planning and security can sometimes be seen as a moving target. The rules change constantly, and you need guidance to stay ahead of the market moves. This is the Lebenthal Report with Michael Hartzman and Dominick Tavella, with additional insight from industry veteran Jordan Kimmel. We'll break down the news, trends, and overall direction of the markets, telling you what may be coming next, investment opportunities, and what to avoid. Now, here are your hosts, Dominick Tavella and Michael Hartzman.
Good evening, everyone. I am Michael Hartzman, along with my partner, Dominick Tavella, and today is Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Dominick, good evening. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Mike?
I'm all right, thank you. So tonight we have a really special show and a special guest, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking to him. But before we get to that, we do have to, briefly touch upon the market and the activity of the last week and what happened with the 10-year Treasury and some of the fear that created. So as always, there's never a shortage of topics, but it was an interesting week of the market the last 7 days.
Yeah, so Mike, the irony is we actually have been speaking about this for several weeks. We talked that once earnings were primarily done with, that there'd be a void of noise and headline risk. And put that with the fact that the 10-year Treasury started rising, at one point hit 1.6%, which is kind of an alarm bell for the markets. And we saw a pretty substantial pullback in the markets last week. So we've been talking about it, waiting for it for a long time. And the S&P pulled back 2.5%, and the tech-heavy NASDAQ 5%. So none of our viewers, none of our clients should have been surprised by it, but clearly there were a lot of investors that were caught on the wrong end of that trade.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because the market always needs something to react to in a 24-hour news cycle. So 20 years ago, if the 10-year Treasury ticks up a few points, I don't think anyone even notices. But now it's headline news, which is frustrating as a financial professional that we always have to deal with the latest news cycle.
It's because it takes over people's emotions, right, Mike? And then they start making decisions on an emotional basis rather than a fundamental fact-based. But I come back to, why are we doing these podcasts? Why are we sending out the newsletters? Why are we doing the network TV interviews? Get our clients in front of the noise, explain to them our thought process, what we're thinking, why we're thinking about it, and what actions are we taking, hopefully in a positive way. And I think our next guest is just going to be phenomenal. We've been very blessed to be able to get him on with us. So I think it dovetails right into what we're talking about.
It really does. So, and that's a great segue. So our next guest, and full disclosure, we actually recorded this interview about 3 weeks ago. Our next guest is Jim Rogers. For those of you who know who he is, he needs no introduction. But for those of you who may not be familiar with his name entirely, he founded the Quantum Fund back in 1973. And over a 7-year period, Dominick, while the S&P 500 had a 47% return, or about 6.7% a year, he was returning to his clients 4,200% or 600% a year. So he spent from 1973 to 1980 doing a phenomenal job for his clients and for himself. And then you'll be envious. He then spent a number of years actually motorcycling around the world and set 2 Guinness Book of World Records. So he really is a fascinating man, and I think our viewers are really going to enjoy his take on the markets and the long view that he takes. He was not investing in a 24-hour news cycle back in the 70s and 80s.
And he's not doing it today. We were blessed. He gave us the time, but he's in Singapore, which was super, super cool. And you are correct, Mike. I don't know if I'm more jealous of his returns or his ability to ride his motorcycle around the world. But we're going to touch on all those subjects. And again, I could not be more proud to have that moment. We have that moment with him where we can just reminisce a little bit, talk about the markets and truly the patience he uses, not a day trader, right? Doesn't care to be a day trader, and looking really at the big picture and trends. And I cannot wait to have our guest speak directly to our clients in this interview and really kind of pass on some really words of wisdom.
And to that point, we have to give a shout out to Jordan Kimmel, who's the head of our equity strategies at Lebenthal. He's the one who arranged this interview. So he's going to take the lead on the interview. But we will take a quick break and we will be right back with Jim Rogers.
Financial planning and security can sometimes be seen as a moving target. The rules change constantly, and you need guidance to stay ahead of the market moves. This is the Lebenthal Report.
And welcome to the Lebenthal Report. It's Jordan Kimmel, the Chief Equity Strategist and Portfolio Manager. And you could see who we're with. It's legendary Jim Rogers. And Jim, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We're going to have a great evening, spend some quality time, and thanks for joining us.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, Jordan. Thank you. It's nice to see you again.
All right. Well, I'm lucky enough to have met you years ago in a green room and a television show, and have subsequently basically read every book you've written. I think everybody should. I want to take us back a little bit to the formative years. Young age and what you've done. I want to spend a little time then maybe Dom and Mike, the principals here, will join us on what you're currently seeing and what they're seeing and what's going on. And then because of your history of looking forward and seeing the future, I'd love to hear what you think. So let me kind of jump right in, folks. If you haven't read the books yet, Jim basically co-founded one of the largest, best performing hedge funds in the world, the Quantum Fund. Jim, you don't like to brag. I know you retired at a young age. You said retired. But the Investment Biker book takes place, I just want to set it, where you actually drove your motorcycle around the entire world. But you didn't do it once, you did it twice. You come back with Adventure Capitalist, which I want to get into a couple scenes from there. Then, Jim, you kind of disappeared on us, but right before the commodity boom in the 2000s, you come up with the book Hot Commodities, saying, folks, it's time for commodities. Then what do? You show up and say you're a bull in China before the bull market starts in China. So let's say you've been a little bit lucky. I think it's a little preparation, but we're joining you right now. You're in Singapore. I just want to talk about some technology for a moment. We're on Zoom. We have a great conversation. But I remember you sharing with me a call you made from Yale when you called home and you told them what your phone number was. And can you please just share that story? Because in one man's lifetime, what has happened is almost unbelievable.
Well, I did. It's nice to see you, Jordan. As I said, I'm delighted to be here. We do go back a long way. I went to Yale from a small town in the backwoods of Alabama. My parents couldn't afford to take me, so I had to call them to tell them I got there, but I had to call on Sunday because in those days it was cheaper to call on Sunday than to call during the week. So I called on Sunday morning and I said to the operator, well, I want to call Demopolis, Alabama, and the phone number is 5. This long pause, and she says, 5 what? You mean all fives? 555. And I said, no, just 1 5. So, are you a college boy? I said, yeah, I'm a freshman. Very proud of myself. She said, well, I don't think this is funny, college boy. I said, no, wait a minute, operator. So I explained I had to call my parents. So we got the New York operator, who got the Atlanta operator, who got the Birmingham operator, who got the Demopolis operator. And the New Haven operator says, operator, I have somebody on the phone here who says he wants to call Demopolis, Alabama, and the phone number is 5. Well, the Demopolis operator never missed a beat. She said, oh, well, they're at church now. And the New Haven operator, you could feel her, and she started saying to me, what's wrong with you, college boy, calling your parents when they're at church? You should know better than that. Like I had done something wrong. Anyway, that was long time ago. Yes,
And
yes.
here's
It
the
was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun though. I was out of my league. I was
Right.
in over my head, but I had a lot of fun.
Right. So there's the operator knows you, you're number 5. And folks, this is one lifetime now with 5G and who knows what next. This is one man's lifetime and it's amazing. So I want you to share one other story, which is just nobody else gets to live like this. Nobody's maybe has the courage to live like this, but you tell a scene from the book, the adventure bike, where you take your second trip with this custom-made vehicle. It's a great story in itself, but you talk about the drive, if you will, the evening in the desert and what you woke up to.
Well, yes, you should have come with us, Jordan.
You
We
wouldn't
were
have wanted
crossing the Sahara Desert, which, by the way, is an astonishing thing to do if you make it. A lot of people don't make it, it turns out. But we were camping, obviously, no hotels or anything. We were camping at our tents in the Sahara. And we woke up in the morning and there were like 150 camels surrounding us because the nomads had showed up and that's where they camped that night by chance. And there were all these camels. And it was such a stunning scene. You cannot imagine waking. I doubt if you've ever woken up, Jordan, with 150 camels surrounding you, surrounding your bed or your tent. And all the women came, the men were out in the field. All the women came in the field, in the desert. All the women came over, looked at our tent. They were very curious about our little tent. We were embarrassed compared to theirs. They had proper living tents, but it was certainly quite an experience.
It's an amazing story. I remember reading the book and I've read everything you've written and I'm a believer that there's 2 ways to learn: experience and reading. And I remember one other thing, Jim, in the green room, you said to me, I said to you something like, my wife doesn't want to go to Florida. And you said, hey, divorce her, man. There's a lot to see. But we stayed together and I just haven't traveled like you have. There's one other thing in the book I want to bring up that I do live through you, which is kind of fun, but it speaks to the preparation of your investment process too. But it's funny, you talk about the story, knowing where you're going, knowing where you're traveling, and you start the journey with several different wallets, each with a little bit of money in them, because you're not going to get home with all the wallets. So why don't you just kind of share how much, with the preparation you took this trip under?
Well, Jordan, I spent 5 years going around the world, 2 years on the motorcycle, 3 years in the car, and I knew I was going to be in many different countries, locales, locations, and who knew? There is crime out there in the world, and travelers sometimes are vulnerable, or people think they're vulnerable. So I wanted to have a fake wallet. So if I got robbed, I could just hand it over to the guy. Didn't want to lose my real wallet with my credit cards and real money, etc. So I prepared a fake wallet, an old wallet with old credit cards and a lot of really large denomination, but not worth much bills. I mean, some of those days, Italian lira, for instance, they had big bills, but they weren't worth anything. So I'd have all this foreign money in the wallets with some expired credit cards, and prepared to hand it to anybody who demanded it, just in case. It was one of many preparations that we made to try to survive. As you can see, Jordan, I'm still alive. I made it. I'm alive. I'm delighted to be here.
You sure have. And I'll tell you, it sounds kind of silly, but in my glove compartment, driving around in the Northeast of the United States, I have 4 different wallets, each with a little bit of money in it, each with an old credit card. And I think of you all the time with it. So it's just a lot of fun having to get to know you and hear these stories. And so let's bring in, one investment question I remember asking you early on, because I just try to learn from the best. And I asked you something about the preparation again, and how you were willing to make the size bets that you were making and so on. And talk to us, please, about the preparation and the homework and the incredible amount of research that you would do before you put on those big positions?
Well, I have learned, Jordan, that you'll never know enough about what you're investing. Now, there are some people, Jordan, who are extremely good traders.
Right.
I used to work for a guy named Roy Newberger. You may remember him. He founded Newberger Berman.
Sure.
He didn't know much of, but he knew every tick in maybe 100 shares on the New York Stock Exchange. He probably didn't. I know he didn't know much about what IBM did, but he knew every tick that stock ever made, and he only knew about 100 stocks. He never. You may remember, these a long time ago, but there's stocks like Memorex were the hottest things in the world once upon a time. You never heard of Memorex, but he knew every tick in General Motors and IBM and things like that. And he was extremely good at it. And he lived over 100. They're still going to the stock exchange. I mean, to his office every day at an age of over 100 years
Fantastic.
old. So some people are like that. Now, I was no good at that. I'm terrible at short-term trading. I'm the worst market timer in the history of the world. But I learned that for me, I had to know everything I could, and even then would make mistakes. I still would make mistakes, but I did as much research as I possibly could, everything from the competitors to the suppliers to everything, to the commodities they bought and sold. That was my way to invest. And sometimes I got it right.
Right. Sometimes you got it right. I'm bringing this up so much right now, Jim, because people are now trading on moving averages. They're trading on a chart without knowing what, too much. And the preparation that you put on, the work that you were willing to do, it's something I taught to my kids, and I had them read your books. Frankly, the idea is there's no substitute for hard work and preparation, and luck does show up once in a while, but I'd rather bank on preparation and discipline every time. So what we'll do here, Jim, I want to take a little break, give us a time here, and then we'll come on and look at the current market. It's a really fascinating market right now. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with Jim Rogers right after this.
Financial planning and security can sometimes be seen as a moving target. The rules change constantly, and you need guidance to stay ahead of the market moves. This is the Lebenthal Report with Michael Hartzman and Dominick Tavella, with additional insight from industry veteran Jordan Kimmel.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Lebenthal Report. We're with legendary investor Jim Rogers. I got lucky enough to ask a bunch of questions to get things started. We have Dominick and Mike have been really looking forward to you joining us, Jim. So let me let them jump right in, and let's talk about maybe the current environment or whatever they want to think about.
Good evening, Jim. I can't tell you what an honor it is to have you here this evening with us, and an opportunity to speak to you. So if you don't mind, I really want to jump into it, because right now, if I understand it correctly, you're in Singapore, correct?
I am in Singapore. It is 9:30 in the morning here.
And you've been in the Far East for quite a while. So given the political environment we've been through in the last 4 years, we used to look at China and the Far East very favorably as in growth and trade, and that kind of fallen off a cliff right now. But I really want to get a sense, really feet on the ground, what your picture is of our current situation and what you predict going forward.
Well, I moved to Asia so that my children would speak Mandarin, Chinese, and would know Asia, because in my view, in the 21st century, Asia is going to be the most important part of the world. So far, Dominick, that has turned out to be correct, as you know. I mean, Asia's got more of the prosperity than other parts of the world, and certainly a lot less debts, some countries here than we have in the US, unfortunately. So. No, so far so good. That's why I'm here. I know from history that whenever things go wrong, politicians blame foreigners. It's easy to blame foreigners. They have different skin, different hair, different language, different religion, different food, different clothes. So politicians always blame foreigners when they're trying to win an election or do something or cover their own problems. And that's been happening in the US. Mr. Trump was blaming Chinese. He was blaming Canadians. He was blaming everybody except himself for problems. And that's part of what's happened. I hope that that calms down now, because Asia has continued moving on, unfortunately, without us. You may know that 15 nations recently came up with a big free trade zone, the largest in the world, without the US. And many of our allies, Japan, Korea, people like that. And the Trans-Pacific Partnership is continuing without us. Now, the rest of the world is moving on. I hope that somebody in Washington says, wait a minute, we got to do something here. There are a lot of people there, a lot of money, a lot of capital and ideas. So I hope that things that the people reconsider, and instead of fighting each other, we can all be friends and party and make prosperity together.
Mike, I can't talk to him all night. You want to jump in? So
Yeah, sure. Jim, this is Michael. Thank you for joining us this morning or this evening, depending on which side of the computer you're sitting on. So clearly you're a historian, and clearly you learn from the mistakes of the past. But in reading up on you in preparation for tonight's call, I also see you as a visionary. And while you cannot imagine living through a pandemic, I would assume you did wind up in a place that got the COVID virus under control very quickly. And looking at the statistics, you seem to have no effects of COVID right now whatsoever. Life seems to be normal for the folks over there. So how do you view how Singapore handled the virus versus how the US handled the virus? And as a US citizen, you know, where do you see us headed in terms of getting this under control?
Well, the the statistics are certainly that Singapore has done a less bad job. Many people have done a less bad job than the U.S. I don't like saying this, Mike. I mean, I'm a U.S. citizen, as you point out, U.S. taxpayer. I certainly don't like saying this, but the facts on the ground are, yeah. I mean, Singapore, we can't travel very much in Singapore, but that's because there's no place to go, you know. And even not that many flights anymore. But no, I was at a restaurant last night. You know, everybody's out and about shopping and doing whatever. There are still some restrictions, but my kids are in school. You know, it's all happening here. I don't know if Singapore, well, at the moment, it's clear that Singapore did a less bad job. We'll know in a few years. You know, Mike, I mean, I was a little bit startled that even as recently as March last year, America didn't even have tests. It was almost impossible to get tested for the virus 2 months into it. I mean, listen, I'm not trying to condemn anybody, but I'm just contrasting the preparation and the actions of what happened here. Everybody was being tested and traced. We had to check in and let wherever we went, so that if something happened, they could find us and we could take action. China, when I go on the internet, I see all the shops and streets and everybody's out and about. In China, they're still traveling, at least within the country. So I'm not in China. They may be lying about a lot of things. They're certainly not lying about the activity in the streets, because I can see it with my own eyes that it's happening. So I hope that in the U.S. we somehow, I don't know quite what to do now, but I hope we can resolve this situation.
Well, speaking of the U.S., I also read an article, an interview you did on January 6th, where you really expressed some concern for our markets in the future, for our children, you know, your daughters, you know, our grandchildren. What worries you the most going forward about our U.S. economy and our U.S. market?
Well, Michael, the U.S. Before this happened was the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. And since then, Mike, they have added unbelievable amounts of debt, and they're adding more and more debt every day. It's good to be an old American, because we're getting the benefit of all of this money that's being spent and thrown out the door. But a young American, oh my gosh, you know, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, people are going to be saying, wait a minute, where'd all this debt come from? what do we do? What do we do now? At the moment, it's good. It's wonderful. Politicians don't particularly care about my children or your grandchildren. They
Mhm.
care about the next election.
That's been the case for a while, unfortunately.
Yeah, oh no, yeah, as I said, we already were the largest debtor nation in the history of the world, and now it's gone up by staggering amounts. But no,
Mhm.
they don't particularly care.
Jim, if I can bring it back to a comment you made earlier, China signed a massive trade deal with the European Union, clearly opening the doors even further for trade to go back and forth. I think this is going to be extremely positive, not only for China, but also the EU. I'd love to hear your opinions on that.
No, you're exactly right, Dom. I mean, as I said before, the world is moving on. Unfortunately, moving on without us, America. I mean, and so, yes, you're exactly right. Everybody is opening up more and more trade with China and with Asia, not just China. Everybody in Asia is getting into this act, and it's going to be gigantic benefits for all of them. Unfortunately, in Washington, they're still hitting people in the face instead of trying to say, hey, let's go have a cup of coffee and sort this out.
We're constantly looking at client accounts, and we've increased and partially due to that very same fact we just talked about, but we've increased our exposure to the EU. I think most Americans are underinvested in the international space. Well, what would you say to that?
Well, they always have been. I mean, Dominick, for whatever reason, I guess maybe because I was from a place where my phone number was 5, I've always been interested in the world because I hope there was something else out there. And I've been investing internationally since I began in the business, and still do. And my own experience was very, very strong that most Americans did not pay much attention to the rest of the world, even though there were huge economies, wonderful companies, huge opportunities. For whatever reason, I don't like saying it, Dom, as you know, I mean, most Americans couldn't find Japan on a map. Don't know why they need to. Now, there are a lot of people in Japan who have the same problem, don't worry, but I'm an American, so I care more about America. It's certainly a shortcoming of our political system, our educational system, our economic system. We need great, great, great opportunities. I mean, you've heard of Toyota, you've heard of Sony, you've heard of some of these great companies that have made huge fortunes for some people. Unfortunately, many Americans missed a lot of those opportunities.
Right. You know what I'm thinking, Jim? When I was a kid, they didn't have these country ETFs they had right now. And if you wanted to invest in another country, there was not a lot of knowledge of which the companies were or how to do it. So potentially these country ETFs will serve a big purpose in spreading capital around the world.
There's no question. ETFs have boomed and are booming, and they are certainly wonderful for lazy people like me. You know, if I want to invest in Japan, I don't have to sit down and figure out a lot of individual companies. I just go on my computer and buy a Japanese ETF. That they cause good things. There will be problems someday, of course, because now everybody owns ETFs, including me, and the ETFs all own the same stocks or the same whatever it happens to be, bonds, currencies, commodities. They all own the same thing. So when the bear market comes, they're all going to dump the same things, and it'll be a massacre. But in the meantime, Jordan, it's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, what you brought up a point Don brought up earlier in the day about the concentration of the buying of these, the spiders and the ETFs, where they're all buying the big companies as new dollars come in. Do you see systemic risk in that, or does that have a way of working itself out? After all, GE's down. It was the biggest company. It's a non-event now, and the market, the world moved on. So do you see the risk in the concentration in the big names, or what are you thinking about that?
Well, Jordan, I've been investing a long time, and yes, I have found many times when everybody's on the same side of the boat, be very, very careful because something's liable to happen. You better go to the other side of the boat if you can, because when everybody starts dumping the same things, they go down enormous amounts. I mean, I can remember in the early 70s, there was something called the Nifty 50. Everybody, all the banks and institutions owned the same 50 stocks, and they sold at huge prices. And then when the collapse came, they went down much more than most other stocks, even though they were still great companies and they still survived. Some of them didn't have a lot of debt, didn't matter. Since everybody owned the same thing and sold the same thing, they all went down huge amount. That's simple markets. That's the way the world works.
Hey, Jim, I read some things you wrote about India. I don't want to kind of tell the world what you think. Can you share at this point what your updated opinion is on India? Is it investable?
Oh, yes, it certainly is. I don't own anything. I'm not short India now, but I have invested in India in the past. It's got lots of second largest population in the world. It's not nearly as dynamic as some other countries. It's got gigantic bureaucracy for one thing, Dom. I mean, they learned bureaucracy from the English,
Yes.
and then they took it to a higher level. I mean, it's astonishing, the bureaucracy there and some of the absurd laws, but there are absurd laws everywhere. So yeah, no, they're great opportunities. I don't have any investment there now. It's partly because it's an expensive market. And they do have a lot of debt. India's built up a lot of debt. They don't talk about it. They like to cover it up, but India does have debt now.
Jim, I know way back when you cut your teeth in the commodities world, and with the boom in electronic vehicles, everyone's talking about EV, and they're tying commodities into the EV story because of the different metals and minerals that are needed for the batteries. Could you speak to that? Do you have an opinion on the EV sector or the commodity sector and how they're tied together?
Well, apparently the world is changing more and more towards electronic vehicles, as you well know. An electronic car uses 4 or 5 times as much copper, for instance, as a regular car. So this is going to certainly increase the demand for some things. It's easy to look it up. You don't have to listen to me. But there are some things that will be in electronic cars. Nickel is another thing. And by the way, electricity is produced from something. It doesn't just fall out of the sky, whether it's coal or oil or sunshine. There is electricity that comes from something. So it's going to open many, many opportunities. People would say, oh my God, electronic cars is going to put a lot of people out of business. Probably will. Electricity put a lot of people out of business, but we're not going to get rid of electricity because it damaged some people. And electronic cars are going to put some people out of business, but it's going to, as I said, 5 times as much copper as in a regular car.
I never heard that before. That's really interesting because I was always thinking it's more the other type of these special minerals and so on. I didn't realize copper is so extensively used in those batteries. That's interesting.
Well, Jordan, check me, but that's my understanding. And if you think about it, I mean, electricity has to have copper wires.
Well, I'm going to check you, and I pretty much know what I'm going to find when I do. So let's do this. Let's take a quick break here, Jim. When we come back, I want to kind of look forward in the markets and what you see. Michael's dead right. You are a visionary, and it's just a pleasure having you. I know you're modest, but thanks for joining us. We'll be right back with more Lebenthal Report following the break.
Financial planning and security can sometimes be seen as a moving target. The rules change constantly, and you need guidance to stay ahead of the market moves. This is the Lebenthal Report with Michael Hartzman and Dominick Tavella, with additional insight from industry veteran Jordan Kimmel.
And welcome back to the Lebenthal Report. I'm Jordan Kimmel, Chief Equity Strategist. We got the whole team with us right now. Jim, what I'd like to do right now is to spend a little bit of time on the future of investing. We look back at the past. This market's a little bit different, but the stock market is also way different than the market I grew up in. It's very different. I know you don't hesitate to pull your punches. Give us a little bit of vision. Come and tell us what you see in the next couple of years, what a young guy like Scott Hartzman should be looking at. And Scott has something particularly wants to ask you.
Well, Jordan, you should be asking Lebenthal. I'm a bad market timer. I'm a bad short-term trader. You call up Lebenthal and you ask them what's going to happen. They know better than I do. My view, for what it's worth, is that right now, all governments in the world are printing staggering amounts of money and borrowing huge and spending. And so things are obviously going to be better in the economy and even in the markets, at least for a while, because there's all this gigantic amount of money. I mean, it takes a long time to build a factory, but you can go online, and you can invest in 8 seconds, 10 seconds. So that's what's happening in the world. The head of the Bank of Japan goes to work every day, prints as much money as he can, as fast as he says, unlimited, that's his word, not mine, unlimited amounts of money, and he buys bonds and stocks and ETFs. Jordan, he's got a lot more money than I do. If he owns Japanese ETFs, I do too. Keep buying, keep buying. But is it good? This is good for everybody right now. But is it going to end? Someday it's going to end. I've seen this movie before, and I know it's going to end badly. You already start to see some signs. You're starting to see bubbles develop in some areas of the investment world. Samsung goes up every day. Tencent goes up every day. The American stocks that go up every day. But there's still a lot of things that are not up. So the bubble is not a complete, full-blown bubble yet, but it looks like it's going to be. And when that happens, I hope I'm smart enough to get out.
Well, Scotty, you're a young man. Scott, tell us what's on your mind, what you're thinking of, Scott.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. So as a young investor, I've been more and more interested in the cryptocurrency market, and many friends have been asking about it as well. What is your opinion about the impact of crypto on the value of the dollar or even diverse trading portfolios?
Well, I mean, I'm not the only one who knows that Bitcoin has gone up staggering amounts of money. I wish I owned it. I've never bought a cryptocurrency. I would also remind you, Scott, that many of them have disappeared.
Right.
Hundreds of cryptocurrencies have disappeared and gone to zero. So this is not some magic wand that's going to make everybody rich and happy and successful. My view is that if and when cryptocurrencies become successful, if they become successful as money, the governments will ban them, because governments don't like to lose their monopoly. Governments don't like to lose their control, and they're just going to say no. And all the crypto guys say, well, we're smarter than the government, and of course they are. But the government's got the guns. Government's got the tanks. And if the government says it's illegal, most people, including me, will not try to use. I mean, India's already said cryptocurrencies are illegal. All money is going to be on the computer. There's no question. Every country is studying, most or nearly every country studying how to do it. In China, you cannot use money anymore. You cannot take a taxi in China with money. I tried to buy an ice cream with money. Poor woman didn't know what to do, because I didn't have my money on the phone. I mean, I do now, but then I didn't have phone money. She gave me the ice cream. I wish I'd been buying a Mercedes or something. Young woman had never used money and didn't know what to do.
Amazing.
So it's all going to happen, and maybe all the cryptocurrencies are going to continue to skyrocket, but governments don't like losing their monopoly.
Thank you. Interesting. And just to follow up on that, I mean, in the U.S. government, for example, do you think we should have a certain percentage of our portfolios invested in Bitcoin at the moment, or really should we hold out on not doing that?
Scott, the people who have done it have done extremely well. Don't
Right.
listen to me. I own no cryptocurrency. I'm not short either, fortunately.
Right.
Well, I wish I'd been short some of the ones that disappeared. No, I have. Everybody has to make their own. You should ask Lebenthal. about what
I
to do
like
with.
it. Hey, Jim,
Thank
we
you.
have one of our special clients on too, actually a mentor of Mike's, Milton, someone I got to know a little bit. Milton, we're happy to have you here, and go ahead, fire away, Milton, on what's on your mind, and Jim will try to help you.
Okay, everybody can hear me now?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, Milt.
I'm an old man at this point. I'm 85 years old, and I'm enjoying every minute of it, though. So, and I'm enjoying what's happening in the stock market now. And when I see somebody like Elon Musk spend $1.5 billion, and he's now going to let people buy automobiles using Bitcoins, I see changes that are taking place that I didn't think were real or could start to happen. So if anybody has an insight to what I'm looking at here, and the second point I just wanted to make, something about what Jim said. I read some articles in the New York Times recently by Paul Krugman, and Paul was saying you can just keep on printing money in the United States. It's not going to be a problem. But obviously, I can't do that with my family, and I can't do that personally. How is the government going to be able to do that?
Well, back to your point about Tesla, and yes, he apparently put $1.5 billion into Bitcoin, and it's obviously caused Bitcoin to skyrocket. I have no idea how it's going to wind up. I do know smart guys I know who tell me that Tesla uses phony bookkeeping. I mean, I've never looked at it, so I don't know. I don't own a Tesla car or anything, but who knows? There are people on both sides. All the shorts in Tesla have lost a lot of money, as you know. So far, he's been right. We will see how that comes out in the end. And as far as buying cars with the money, he said in limited special circumstances. It's not as though you can walk into a shop and pay with Bitcoin. I don't know the special circumstances, but I know it's not quite as simple as the headlines make it out to be. As far as printing money, as you know, Milton, you've been around longer than I have even, when things are going bad, people look for an answer, and they always look for an easy answer. And at one point, Mr. Marx had easy answers, and it was a great answer. A lot of people tried Marxism for decades. I mean, we now know it didn't work. It doesn't work. Nobody wants to be a Marxist anymore. If they do, they at least want to be a rich Marxist. They don't want to be a poor Marxist, that's for sure. So we will see. Now there's this theory, MMT, more money today, just print it out. And I'm sure the British are already, they're not doing it officially, but in practice, they are actually just printing money. And other governments, the Japanese are certainly doing it. It's probably going to have many people who will try it. Now, they all say, don't worry, don't worry. Well, I'm old enough to worry. I have a little silver just in case, just in case they're wrong. I got a little gold. Milton, I'm an old peasant. All of us old peasants still know and believe that we better have a little silver in the closet or a little gold under the bed if things get really bad. But Mr. Krugman and the MMT people say, don't worry, we'll just print it all up and we won't have any problems.
Hey,
I
Jim,
hope so. Oh my
sorry.
gosh, I love easy answers too. But
I haven't traveled the world as much as you have, but I did spend a little time in Zimbabwe quite a number of years ago, and I'm holding my souvenir, which is a $1 billion bill. And basically, as you know, the history, Zimbabwe tried to print money to get out of their problems. That $1 billion bill couldn't buy you a Coke by the time the whole thing collapsed. So there are pitfalls to printing money without any restrictions. And history has taught us
Venezuela right now, same thing. They just printed and printed. You'd think that Venezuela would be the richest country in South America again. It hasn't worked that way. But people like easy answers. And a lot of learned people will tell you more money to the MMT is okay. And so people will try it. But in my view, we're all going to learn by experience that it's not going to work
We
down the
hope for
road.
better answers than some of those countries experienced.
As I said, it's a good time to be old. It's not a good time to be young.
Well, Jim, let me just share, I go back to the books you've written, and I shared with Michael earlier, if you read especially the investment biker and adventure capitalist, if you're able to retain all the history that you share as you enter a country, discuss their currency, the last couple hundred years of regime change there, it's actually like a history book wrapped into an economics book, wrapped into a visionary. And I just share that everyone ought to read those particular books. The cat's out of the box already with China growth and the commodity growth. You were in front of those though, and I just have to say, you're not making a bold statement here right now, but you said earlier, when a group of people all get aligned on one trade and it becomes a crowded trade, it usually doesn't end right. And I have a feeling Scott asked a question about whether the country should start putting some of the Federal Reserve's money in Bitcoin. And I just wish they asked that question 15 years ago. And I certainly hope they say no today. That's just my take on it.
Well, we all wish we'd bought Bitcoin 15 years ago, or whatever it was, 13, 14. On the other hand, Jordan, I'll remind you, many cryptocurrencies have gone to zero and disappeared. Now, if we were all smart enough to buy the one that did well, or the six that did well, there are another 600 or 6,000 that disappeared.
Right. Well, Jim, what we do here at Lebenthal, it's a very conservative firm. It's built on income. It's built on solid foundation. And then from there, you buy your equities. And I learned so much from reading your books. We all thank you so much for joining us. You gave us a lot of your time today, which we appreciate. And how about we do this again next year and we see how this year worked out? What do you say?
Well, I'll be very keen. As I said, I'm a longtime fan of Lebenthal. Jordan, I hope we all survive 2021.
God bless.
I hope there is a 2022. The way the world is going, we certainly look like we're going to survive 2021. I just hope there is a 2022.
Well, I say let's be hopeful for that, and I always say, Jim, as scary as the news looks, my opinion is the sun will come up in 5 years from now, and you have to handle your investments based upon the fact it's not the end of the world. It's been so nice to spend this hour with you, and we hope to do it again really soon.
Well, you're exactly right, and Lebenthal certainly knows that the world has never come to an end, and that somehow or another we're all going to survive. And if you are careful with your investing, you will survive too. So a lot of people made a lot of money in the 30s, as you know. I'm sure that Lebenthal will come out of this in good shape. I do too.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it.
For the time you've given us this evening. Thank you.
The real treat. Thank you.
Been a lot of fun. It's the Lebenthal Report. Legendary investor Jim Rogers. We'll see you soon. And thanks for the time. We'll see you soon. Bye now.
Financial planning and security can sometimes be seen as a moving target. The rules change constantly, and you need guidance to stay ahead of the market moves. This is the Lebenthal Report with Michael Hartzman and Dominick Tavella. We'll break down the news, trends, and overall direction of the markets. Now, back to the Lebenthal Report.
Well, Dominick, that was a lot to unpack. I forgot how great experience that was a few weeks ago.
What a gracious man to give us that much time and that many pearls of wisdom. I am literally smiling ear to ear about it, and I am going to make a very concerted effort to make sure our clients get to watch this or hear it. Come on, they've watched everything on Netflix possible, Mike. They got to find a few minutes to listen to a very, very wise gentleman with his kind of background and history.
And not only is he wise, I mean, you referred to him this morning when we did our broker call as the Babe Ruth of investing. And what I've read about Babe Ruth, which is a lot, his ego was as large as his statistics, and Jim was the complete opposite. I mean, so humble and so filled with humility, which was made the experience even better.
And just to be able to have that kind of very casual conversation and get these ideas out, which are very powerful ideas, right? Forget this day trading, forget the hot product du jour, I don't want to pick on Bitcoin, but look at long-term trends, look at long-term investments. And, the Warren Buffett, don't ever bet against America and don't ever bet against business on a worldwide scale. I think it's a powerful,
Right.
powerful message.
Right. And to me, the best takeaway of all was when he said he's the worst market timer there is. So what does that mean? You and I get together every week and we dissect the activity of the past week. At the end of the day, Dominick, just stay the course and don't panic. I mean, that's really what he was trying to say.
And look, we lived it very, very recently last March, right? Where if we had panicked, if clients had panicked, not only would they have gotten out of the market a particularly horrific time, but then wouldn't have made the particularly good gains that we ended up having last year. So again, pearls of wisdom, very grateful he gave us the time. Hopefully we get to do it again somewhere down the road.
Well, he certainly sounded like he was more than willing to. So I'm sure Jordan will not be bashful about asking him again, God willing, a year down the road.
And we have other people with his pedigree coming up. I'm genuinely pleased, surprised that we're getting the guests that we're getting, and hopefully our clients are just taking advantage of it. And by all means, they should be emailing it to their friends, right? They should be forwarding it and let anybody that wants to participate in this. We're grateful for that, but really, words of wisdom that people should be listening and following.
Absolutely. And if things break the way they think they're going to next week, if we had Babe Ruth tonight, we're going to have Lou Gehrig next week. So it is pretty exciting.
We'll hold that one, that surprise. We'll hopefully have a tremendous guest next week, but can't get much bigger than what we've just done. But looking for bigger and better things always.
Absolutely. So again, thank you to Jordan for setting that up. And thank you to our audience for listening and spending the hour with us. And we wish you a good evening.
Best wishes to all. Be safe. Wear your masks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Lebenthal Report. Dominick, Michael, and Jordan will be back for our next program, airing next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Time and 5 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Business Channel. Until then, have a great week.